Welcome to Torchlight's Exceptional Parenting Podcast, where we talk with the nation's top experts about today's toughest parenting challenges. Whether you're concerned about your child's development, learning, behavior, or you just want to make family time more enjoyable, we share the practical solutions and tools that can help.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Torchlight's Exceptional Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Stefanie Boucher, and it is currently April of 2020, and we are in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic that has drastically altered just about every aspect of our lives. Most of us are sheltered in place at this time, unless you're an essential worker. Nearly all of us are separated, physically at least, from many of our loved ones, and we may be concerned about our parents, grandparents, siblings, friends, or colleagues. And not insignificantly, our children are home from school. This includes not only our nation's K through 12 children who are trying to learn from home, but also our college age and young adult children. Early on in this crisis, many of our nation's colleges were among the first institutions to move to an entirely online learning format and send the students packing. So if you're listening to this, it's very likely that you have a young adult in the house who is home unexpectedly. And while that might be nice to have them there in some ways, it's also possible that they don't want to be there necessarily because that's not what they were anticipating. And conversely, you might be having a tough time with this transition because you weren't anticipating their presence right now either. It can be challenging to welcome home a young adult who has been living away, even in the best of circumstances, because you and your child tend to change throughout the college years. But I suspect it's even more difficult right now because we're living through a crisis and because we're all stuck at home together inside the same four walls day after day after day. So we're going to talk about that today and give you some tips for improving family dynamics during this highly unusual time. I have Stacey Harris on the line today. Stacey is the Associate Director for Disability Services at Boston University. She has over 20 years of experience focusing on civil rights and compliance issues in higher education and government settings. And in her current role, she focuses on university policy, technical standards and compliance. She also works directly with students, not only on accommodations, but also on their self-advocacy skills and much more. Welcome, Stacey. I am so happy you could be here today.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I always love chatting with you, so I think this is going to be a great topic to cover. As someone who is currently in contact with a lot of students and with their families, I'd be curious to know what are the most common concerns or frustrations that you are hearing right now with regards to our young people suddenly being at home again?
Well, that is the question. I should start by saying I come at this from a disability perspective. I also just work in student affairs in all different ways. I run a peer mediation program, and I also teach. So we're seeing this with students with disabilities and all students in a variety of ways.
Right.
And I think no one size fits all, really. Some students, it hasn't really hit them yet, and they're still just trying to keep up with classes. Some, I think, are really in shock because they were in the middle of doing wonderful things and studying hard and having their own lives, and it was disrupted. There's a process to this, whether it's anger, anxiety, grief, frustration. We are really seeing it all, and everyone comes to it in a different way at a different time, as with parents. So it is a bumpy road right now.
Yeah. I would imagine that, parents and families tend to fall into established family dynamics when their kids come home. And this might be during a summer break or, a winter break or something, probably more on the part of the parents than the kids. I would guess the kids kind of want to come home and continue to be the people that they were when they were at school. But I suspect that it's very easy for parents in particular to try and sort of just naturally fall back into these old established family patterns where the parents act a certain way and they expect the kids to do a certain thing. Are you seeing that right now? Is that a complaint that you're hearing from students or parents?
Oh, yes. We are in an exceptional moment.
Yeah.
So it's not like we planned spring break and everyone knows how to go home and kind of get along for 5 days or 10 days or whatever it is, Christmas break. Like there are rituals and routines to that we all know how to do because we've all lived together for a really long time. So this is not that. So I think the first piece is, these young adults have gone to school, evolved and grown, and they've learned new skills and new rituals and routines around when I get up and when I go to bed and, who are my romantic involvements? When do I study? When do I work out? All that stuff. And what they haven't had is someone saying, when are you going to shave? Pick up your laundry. You smell bad. Did you do your homework? Did you take your medicine? Help me with the dog. They haven't had that and they weren't expecting it. So when we're getting ready for spring break or we're getting ready for Christmas, you pack your stuff and you know what you're going to need and you only pack 7 pairs of underwear, whatever it is, and it's expected. So I think humans aren't always great with change and discomfort. Well, this is a whole lot of change and a whole lot of discomfort. And now you're home and maybe a lot of relatives are there and maybe it's not a big house. Maybe it's a little house and you're all there for a long time and you didn't expect it and you might not have your stuff and maybe the person you're dating isn't there or maybe they are. There's a lot to this. And I do think that we parents are, and I'll speak from both sides because I have 2 teenagers, we're scared and freaked out and what we want to do is control. And our young people are freaked out and they want to control. And we have a big old game of tug of war going on. But I will say that falling into what we normally do is not what's working because this isn't normal, right? So saying, oh, you're home. So, walk the dog and help with dinner. That's not what's going to work right now because all of the schools are saying, hey, you're still in classes.
Yeah.
And we still want you studying and we still want you engaging. And that's not always on a family timeline. So that is inherent conflict. And you're probably working at home too.
Right.
Or you're not. And that's another stressor. Or, there may be illness or not. So this is kind of like we're all shipwrecked on an island together in a storm with the stuff we have.
Yeah. Well, you're
not great.
You're right about the fact that there is nothing normal about this situation. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I think most people would. What should parents say and not say or do and not do? I mean, what are some of those things that are going to have a tendency to, trigger your young adult child in a negative way?
Yeah. So let's just first talk about the living together and we'll keep the emotional piece separate for the moment, like just being in the same house. So if you can envision where your child was supposed to be, right? They were supposed to be at school, studying and living this life. And we're kind of picking them up and saying continue. So I would say have a 10-minute conversation when you are not elevated and when they are not elevated and say, tell me about your schedule. What does it look like? When are classes? When do you study? When do you work out? And I would honor the schedule that they have. So if they don't want to hang out, cool. They don't want to have family meals, cool. They may have classes from 8 to 10 at night and work out and talk to their friends, at other times. So if they're going to be still in school and working hard, plus the stress of this kind of chaotic world, I would allow that and, maybe revisit it every few weeks. But I would do a quick check-in and then at the same time say, okay, I'm working at home too. We have to figure out where we're all going to do this. That's kind of the number one is, do you have a place to study and do I have a place to work? Yeah. So I think that's primary. And since we're all kind of rigid and concrete right now with everything going on, what everyone needs is creativity and flexibility. So your kid might be in their bed studying with no line of demarcation between hanging out with friends, a video game, and homework. So maybe it's time to go into the attic or the backyard or the basement and find a piece of wood that you can stick over a file cabinet and help them make a desk facing away from the living room. We just put a mattress up over a wall. Your house will go back to normal. This will end. But for now, it should be okay to tack up a sheet, create privacy, create space to work and be private.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think a lot of people are having to make slight, interesting modifications to their homes right now that they wouldn't ordinarily make. I mean, I have a whole kind of portion of my home right now that is sort of allocated for, it's like a staging area for groceries or any new things that come into the house. And it's like a disinfecting area and all of that. And so I was just thinking about that because my groceries came this morning. And I was just thinking about how, wow, I never really thought I would have to like make a space like this for how long will this, how long is this going to be here? And this just these crazy little thoughts. But, that's a really interesting point, depending on the structure of your space that, there may never have been another time where you've all had to work in such a tight space. That's a great set of tips, I think.
And another really funny thing is I have never gone to online school. So, we were teaching a class on Wednesday. And a mom I have 20 students, and a mom walked in the room and put a sandwich down in front of her daughter. And her daughter was just devastated because, like, Mom, everyone can see you. I am really in a class. They can hear you.
That is, yes.
So in that 10-minute kind of check-in with your kid, is it a synchronous class or an asynchronous class? Like, if I'm doing dishes and singing, are your friends going to hear me? I just think basic parameters around school, sleep. Flip side, you're not their maid. So it's okay to come home and keep your own schedule. But the flip side of that is, you already did your laundry and got your own food and cleaned up after yourself. So you've got to be in charge of that stuff too, so it got to be a give and take. A little footnote on that. If you have a young person that has stuff, okay, we all have stuff, but I would imagine if you have a young person that had a little anxiety, they probably have a lot right now. If they had a little bit of trouble following school and now it's all online, that might be harder. So I think they might not be able to help as much if it's taking more energy just to do school and manage this change.
Interesting.
So I think that flexibility and awareness really matters too.
Yeah, that's a great point. Another thing that I wanted to ask you is just a little bit about how our young people are feeling right now. I mean, many of them, and we touched on this earlier, have had to let go of some pretty fantastic opportunities. Maybe they were supposed to study abroad this semester and they didn't get to go, or they had to come home. Maybe they're missing out on athletic opportunities that they've trained for a long time, or commencements, that are coming up. How can parents talk to their kids about what they've lost and help them grieve and find some larger perspective in this situation?
Yeah, that's really what it's all about right now. And I have 2 teenagers dealing with some of those things. So I would start with, this is hard, and students are feeling all of the things you can think about: anger, frustration, panic, sadness. So I would start with validating. This sucks. This is hard. It's hard for me. It's hard for you. And the other thing is, I wouldn't try to fix it because you can't.
No.
There isn't a way to fix this or make it feel better. So there isn't, I wouldn't spend a lot of time saying, oh, let's look at another summer program. Let's look at a different way to do the SATs. What I would say is, after validating how they feel, I would be human. These are young adults, adult light, as I like to call them. And you don't have to shelter them from your feelings like when they were 10 or 7. It's okay for them to know you're scared too. It's affecting your life too. And I would say, if they want to talk, great, but also remind them that whatever school they were in should have switched to have most of their support still available. Maybe the therapy is through Zoom. Maybe the sports classes are in a different way, but they need to seek support in whatever way they can. I would say, don't personalize when they bite your head off, because that is the time. And I would say the most important piece is, this is happening globally.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So it's not just happening to your school. You were about to be captain of the softball team. You were about to take the GREs. All of these things have stopped. The bar has stopped. All of it. Mm-hmm. But it has stopped for everyone equally. And I would say that the best schools who are doing well right now are being flexible, empathetic, and creative, right? So they're switching to pass fail. They're switching to saying to faculty, let's just help them get through. And so I would say to them, NCAA is going to figure it out, right? And the SATs are going to figure it out and are figuring it out. You know, they've already changed, and colleges are switching to test optional. So the takeaway for me is right now, what stinks is that we don't know anything, and we're not going to know anything. But I keep envisioning April as the month to be a student. Self-care and study. That's now. And I think by May 1st, we will know some more information. Not all, but we're going to start getting more information about how we're doing and what comes next. And admissions offices are doing stuff online. And I would say wait as long as you can, sitting with your discomfort, and then we'll get there. And all the Division I sports teams are going to start talking online and reaching out. And lots of schools may move commencement and have alternate proms. But I think now everybody's sitting at home, so there's time to think and think and think and think.
And panic.
Right.
And think about all of the terrible scenarios that might happen.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. But the reality is, if you are home and well and safe, right? So right now we're still making sure that students got to where they needed to get to, and that they have the food that they need to eat, and that they're safe and healthy after that. You know, that's what every school is doing right now. So we're all still dealing with that piece. So it's not time to call and say, how's housing going to work in the fall? And our summer class is going to be online, because we don't know yet. And that's a horrible answer, but that's the reality. So here's the other thing. You've got all this time now to get it together in other ways. You should still be working out. You could learn another language. You could be amazing, artist. There are so many things you could do with this time, and your peers are not all going to stop, right? So other kids are going to learn Mandarin or, create a podcast. So you have time to do other things or just be exceptional at school and give it a few weeks.
Well, I'm glad that you brought all of that up, because that incidentally was one of my questions, because I've heard a number of high school students already worried because they're afraid they're going to fall behind, and they're missing a semester, and they're not going to be as viable as college applicants next year, and it's going to affect their SAT scores, and there's a lot of panic in high schools right now. So it's nice to hear that colleges are already thinking about this, again, not knowing what this is all going to look like and exactly what they're going to do, but that they are considering this. It is affecting everyone globally. You're not the only ones whose SATs are going to be affected by this. It's all of the SAT test takers and that kind of thing.
Something I think parents should know is that those of us that work in higher ed, we work in higher ed because we absolutely love working with 18 to 22-year-olds. We miss them. The hallways, nobody's there, and it's lovely to have a Zoom call with your young people, but we do this work because we love the age group. So they should reach out to us with questions, but knowing how much we care about them. Like, we wouldn't do the work if we didn't love them. So we want it to feel as good as possible for them. That's what this is all about. So I think when all of our schools are planning for summer and fall, we're thinking about things like, hey, we want it to be in person, so we're planning that. And parallel, we're planning something online in case we have to. So we're doing kind of twice the work right now to make sure they're going to get exactly what they want and get connected and meet each other in whatever way we can do it, because we're dying to have them here.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think that some interesting innovations are going to come out of this in higher ed? It seems.
Oh, I do.
Yeah, I think that's inevitable, right? Because I've already heard of some schools saying they may not even require SAT scores next year or something. So I'm not saying that's a universal statement by any stretch, but it seems like there will be new ways of doing things for a little while.
I think so. Our school is, you can choose, I think is how it's going to be in the fall, that you can still submit a score or not. And so I do think it's allowing schools to kind of take a deeper dive into the applicant pool. But also, what does it mean to visit a school and try it on? Maybe there will be Zoom tours, through buildings and, more virtual conversations. And we're thinking about, how do we teach culture and vibe of a school through a computer? But the funny part is they're so much better at it than we are.
They are.
Like, they're totally comfortable with the technology side. But I do think it'll be very innovative. At BU, our dean does something called Coffee and Conversation, where he engages a large group of students in these really kind of deep conversations and have other staff members do it. And they're still doing it. So I think it took a little while to, it happened so suddenly. And I think when you asked what students are feeling, I think some students feel like the schools made them leave too fast, didn't give them enough notice. But it's funny because kind of the federal government made changes and then suddenly states reacted and we reacted. And it seemed like 2 hours later we had to react again. Things kept changing and changing and changing. And it's like we kept sending out a policy that would say one thing and then the government changed. So it did feel really fast. And all schools kept trying to do it in a way that felt as organic as possible and loving as possible. It was just super sudden.
It was weird. I mean, there's super weird. There was no better word for it than it's just super weird because, and it was crazy in those early days because, everything was changing on such a day by day basis. At Torchlight, we were trying to keep our, the recommendations from the CDC posted for people. And it was like you had to go in daily because it was just different all the time.
Right. And no context. What context did you have for this?
Sure.
So in your brain, you'd say, okay, well, I'll go home for a week and then we'll all come back. So if we can't understand it, it's funny. I tried to kind of zoom out, no pun intended, to kind of what's the parallel in the world? And things have happened in one country or another country. And I'm like, do I have to zoom back to the plague?
Yeah.
Until I can find something that kind of affected everyone? It's very difficult, but I am thankful that we're all going through it together to have this kind of global understanding. I think will be unifying.
It's very connecting in a strange way because you're alone, but you also feel very connected to the entire world because everyone's doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's also very humanizing.
So much
to be in
so.
a meeting and see somebody's kid run behind them, and you can tell whose beard is growing too long. And, it is very, very humanizing.
Absolutely. So circling back to parents a little bit, we talked a little bit about the grief that children or young adults may be experiencing. What about the fact that parents are also grieving? How might they address what it is they have lost? I'm thinking that, some parents are empty nesters now, and maybe they were really enjoying that. Not that they didn't miss their children, but they may have really enjoyed their life on their own.
Yes, I mean, the hope is that the person you fell in love with, you're really excited to be able to hang out with again. Or maybe you were dating and that was just starting to go really well. That's real.
Yeah.
And parents are going to go through their own grief with that. They were finally having some time alone. And it is okay to feel that. And parents need just as much, if not more, self-care in this process. Mindfulness, yoga, therapy, whatever it is. I also think that reaching out to friends and tapping out when you need somebody else to tap in. And so if you have a spouse, if you have had enough, you tap in and say, I can't do the kid stuff right now, and have someone else fully take over, turn off the news. But I also think if you are the only parent, it is a great time to do a FaceTime call with an aunt for your kid, and let other people have these conversations, right? And parents are dealing with other stuff, loss of jobs, fear of health, and retirement accounts.
Yeah.
And those are very, very real and big and more scary than, I think parents don't know if they should have that conversation.
That's right.
With young people, but those are real. And so I think it is time to walk the dog, bubble bath, self-care as much as possible, so all the times that would have been your commute or other things need to be, lunch break, that needs to be all about you. If gardening is your thing, go do more.
Yeah.
As much as you want to care for your kid, they're doing it. They're reaching out to their friends. Trust that they're doing it.
Oh, they're doing it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but we need to be doing it. I think that's so much.
Yeah, and it's different for them in a sense because they're already so used to being in touch with all of their friends virtually every day anyway. I mean, they saw them in person, but they were also virtual, and it was, and that's very new for some of their parents. Right. So let's shift over to some of the logistics for a little while. What might a parent say to a child living on their own if they, so let's say your child didn't live in on-campus housing, right? And the child is living on their own and you're worried about whether or not your kid is following social distancing guidelines. I think that must be a thing for people.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll start by saying that I have a son who will be 20 next month who lives in another state. And when this started, he said, I want to stay in my apartment. And initially, I think that's because, like the rest of us, he thought life would just start up again.
Yeah.
And so he didn't want to leave. And then he thought, in 2 weeks, I'll be back at it. And we had a lot of conversations around, hey, if that happens, you may not be able to come back for a variety of reasons. Maybe transportation will shut down. Maybe it's not safe to come back. And he really wanted to be there. And we really needed to validate that. His stuff is there. His cat is there. His friends are there. He basically said, I'd be in limbo there or here. Mm-hmm. So I think that was kind of the first piece. And I think he was also worried about, I don't want to be ill. He's not ill, thankfully, but he didn't know if coming home would make somebody here sick.
That's right.
So the safety protocol thing is a different conversation. So if you have a young person living alone, how do you control the wind is, I think, my first point, right?
Yeah.
They're 20. You got to trust them. You can't have a lecture for more than 10 minutes. They probably know more than us. And if someone is engaging in risky behavior, it is what it is. You can only do so much education. But my line is if they want to come home and they're engaging in the risky behaviors, that's a different conversation. So if you have been on spring break, raving with your friends, is that even a word anymore? If you are not washing your hands, if you have somebody at home with an immune issue, it is okay. You stock them with food and gloves and whatever they need. But I do think it's okay to say, if you are going to come home and you have been unsafe, you have to have a certain amount of time and commitment to, following these protocols. And if they're home and not being safe, that's a really serious conversation because that's health for everybody. So if you are lucky enough to live in a house with a basement, you can say, if you're going to be unsafe, you can be here, but we can't connect. You can't come in the kitchen and touch stuff.
Yeah.
We love you and we want you safe. It's clear that you're still going out to play basketball with 10 of your friends. That's not okay. I would be super tough about those pieces.
Well, as you mentioned, it's a safety risk for the entire household, but those are very tough conversations to have. And that's hard for parents to draw those lines when you're so concerned about your child and wanting to be welcoming, but you have to consider the health of everyone. Yeah. That's tough.
It's so tough. And as parents, it's so funny, right? What's that conversation about how we won't spend any money on ourselves, but you'll throw your money out the window for your kid?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This is that, right? So we'll do anything for them. But this is really a life or death moment. My wife has an immune issue. So I know we had that conversation saying, we totally support where you want to be. But if you come home, it's 14 days in the basement.
Yeah.
Or 10 feet away from us. And he gets it. He wanted to be there and he's doing really well there. He's not touching anything.
Yeah.
He's afraid of a lot of it right now. And he has one roommate and they're following the protocols together.
Oh, good.
But they're also 20. No parent wants to say, don't come home. And no parent wants to say, I need you separate. But these are adults. Adult light again. So as long as they have what they need in their own space, are they close to a hospital? Our son has asthma only when he's sick, so he has an inhaler he's taking preventatively. We do everything we can do, and then we respect their decision. And in your own house, that's a bigger deal. So yes, tough conversations.
But necessary. So
So
good advice.
necessary. Yeah.
Very
important,
good advice.
because if we're not well, how are we going to take care of them? This is not I'm not a doctor at all, not a therapist, but this is not a joke. So we do need to do what we can do to be well. I mean, people are washing, as you said, groceries and bleaching off cardboard boxes. So this is not small. The flip side is this will pass. It won't pass today, but it is so hard to sit in discomfort and wait, but it will end. Viruses end.
Yeah.
This is bizarre, but it will end, and then life will happen again. So we just need to find that resolve and grit, to kind of stick it out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a tough situation for just about everyone, but we know there have to be some silver linings in here too. I'd love to hear your perspective on what those might be. What do you think?
Sure. Well, let's start with the fun ones, right? Things like when I walk around my neighborhood, it feels like I'm back in Free to Be You and Me. Every kid always wanted to play with video games, and now that they can, they are outside with sidewalk chalk.
Yeah.
I am seeing hopscotch, drawn out, and siblings playing together, and people wanting family meals, and people missing hugging their parents, and kind of beautiful humanity. A friend of mine, she's a musician. She's been giving online Facebook concerts twice a week, and all the money she raises are going to send pizzas to nurses and doctors in Manhattan. I mean, beautiful moments are happening. Pollution is clearing. We have time to think and see faces. The other thing is that since the beginning of this was panic, I keep thinking about, I always want a day off to hang out with my people. And now that we're kind of figuring out how to be home, it's time to work on some of that stuff. Like, you know what? I wanted to do a project. I can work in the garden. I can have a campfire in the backyard and make s'mores and laugh. And I think it's the gift of time and working things out kind of slowly. I think those are beautiful things. The other thing is that, I think I said this before, but schools are doing a great job being creative and flexible and loving. And I hope that is the beginning of the future of this, that we have kind of a more universal way of dealing with people because we've all been through something. It's kind of a cross-boundary thing where we can all kind of get it. We can understand what everybody else has been through. And finally, we can all say self-care is a good thing.
Yes.
It doesn't feel selfish.
Yes.
Like, yeah, it's okay to take time for me and let the world stop and visit nature. So I think there are going to be great things. I also think, in terms of this age group, it's a great opportunity to learn what your kids are doing in college, or in their first jobs, because you're going, oh my God, I can't believe what you're studying. That's incredible. In hearing how wonderful their conversations are with their friends. So I think beautiful things are coming.
There are a lot of little beautiful moments to be seen everywhere. Life definitely feels heavy right now, but as stressful as this all is, I do just have those moments where, I look over at my kids or something and I feel overcome with, and not that I don't normally anyway, but just in a different kind of way. Like I feel so appreciative to just have that moment in the house with them, or a moment, as you said, of self-care can feel so indulgent in a really good way right now as we're busy, disinfecting groceries and doing all of these crazy things we never ever thought we'd have to do. But there are all these other little
cooking
moments
together,
where it just feels so luxurious in a strange way.
Yeah, there is an exercise in learning how to be thankful. I am in my basement and maybe people feel stuck in the house, but we are healthy and working and supporting people who are not healthy and maybe not working. And I think this is a time to take that pause and go, you know what? This is a period of time of reflection before we go to the next step. And that's okay.
Yeah.
One note that I did forget to say is, these are not times to make changes.
Interesting.
People are overthinking right now and have a lot of time to think and are elevated. So this may not necessarily be the time to say, I hate my job, or I want to switch college, or breakups. All of those things, we are all elevated. So pause button on all things, right? So I would say no huge changes right now.
Yeah, there's a risk of sort of, to use that old expression, throwing the baby out with the bathwater at the moment, right? So
absolutely.
Proceed with caution.
Absolutely.
Well,
it certainly will.
Stacey, thank you so much for being here today. You've given us so much to consider. We are faced with some real big challenges right now, but I feel very hopeful that we can all find connection as we make our way through it. So thank you so much for all of that.
Oh, and thank you so much for having me. And, I just wish lots of luck and health to everyone listening. And yes, this will pass.
Thank you. And we wish all the best in terms of good health and low anxiety to you and your family as well. If you'd like to learn more about managing anxiety during the pandemic, or if you want other information about CDC guidelines or information about how to navigate your child's school closure, you can find a number of resources on the Torchlight platform. We also encourage you to check out our other podcasts, which are available pretty much wherever you listen to podcasts. That is it for now. Thank you all so much for being here with us today, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Torchlight's Exceptional Parenting Podcast. Find this and other episodes on iTunes, Spreaker, and Podcast Go. If you're interested in bringing Torchlight Child or any of Torchlight's other caregiving products to your workplace, please contact info@torchlight.care. That's info@torchlight.care.